Hey folks, welcome back to Forgotten Battles of WWII, where we rip apart the myths and get real about the machines that decided fates on the battlefield. Today, we're diving into one of the most legendary Soviet tanks ever, the kv-1, Stalin's unbreakable giant that shocked the Germans in 1941 like nothing else. You've probably heard the stories. This beast with insanely thick armor that laughed at German shells, holding off entire divisions single-handedly. The tank that made Panzer crews panic and radio back, "We can't penetrate it." But here's the shocking nightmare we're exposing. Why kv-1 crews endured pure hell inside this so-called monster, trapped in a rolling torture chamber of bad design, breakdowns, and sheer misery that often doomed them more than the enemy. We're talking cramped hellholes, unreliable transmissions that left them stranded, terrible visibility, overheating in summer and freezing in winter, and ergonomics so awful that loading the gun felt like a workout from hell. This is the unfiltered truth behind the myth, how a tank that terrified the Nazis became a curse for its own Red Army men, with epic tales like the Raseiniai lone wolf stand and the bloody debut in Barbarossa. Let's jump in and see why the kv-1 was unbreakable on the outside, but broke its crews on the inside. Picture this. It's June 22, 1941. Operation Barbarossa kicks off, and the Germans blitz into the Soviet Union expecting a quick win against inferior Soviet gear. Early on, they run into kv-1s, these 45-ton heavies with up to 100 millimeters of cast armor in places, sloped just enough to bounce 37 millimeter and 50 millimeter shots like pebbles. One famous incident near Raseiniai in Lithuania, a single kv-1 blocks a road, holds off the 6th Panzer Division for a full day, shrugging off dozens of hits, forcing Germans to call in 88 millimeter flat guns and even dive bombers to finally knock it out, only to find the crew had fought to the last man. Stories like that spread fast, boosting Soviet morale and making Hitler furious, demanding better anti-tank weapons overnight. On paper, the kv-1 was a beast, armed with a 76.2 millimeter gun that could smash early panzers, wide tracks for mud and snow, and that armor making it nearly invincible frontally against anything the Germans had at the time. Stalin pushed it into production in 1939 after the Winter War lessons, naming it after Kliment Voroshilov, and by 1941, hundreds were rolling out to counter Finnish bunkers and potential threats. Crews must have felt like gods at first. Nothing can touch us, but reality hit hard and fast, turning pride into suffering. The biggest curse? The transmission and clutch. Oh man, it was a nightmare, notoriously unreliable, with gears grinding and failing under the tank's massive weight, especially on rough terrain or hills. Drivers had to wrestle a stubborn gear shift that required brute force, often double clutching like madmen, leading to exhaustion after just hours. One vet recalled shifting gears felt like bench pressing in a sauna, and breakdowns were constant. A sheared final drive or slipped clutch could leave you immobile in open fields, waiting for enemy fire. In the chaos of 1941 retreats, many kv-1s were abandoned not from battle damage but mechanical failure, crews blowing them up to deny the enemy. And the engine? The V2 diesel was powerful at 600 HP, but early models overheated like crazy without proper cooling, boiling radiators in summer dust or freezing in cold starts. Maintenance was a joke. Accessing parts meant hours of labor in the field, often under artillery, with tools that barely fit the massive components. Then there's the crew compartment. 5 men crammed into a space designed for punishment. Commander doubled as gunner in early versions, no room to move, loader heaving 30-kilogram shells in a turret so tight he bruised elbows constantly, driver peering through tiny slits with zero peripheral vision, radio op buried under equipment. Ventilation sucked, filling the air with fumes and cordite that choked lungs, temperatures swinging from freezing metal in winter to oven-like in summer battles. Visibility was criminal. Periscopes fogged up, slits iced over, commander's cupola limited, meaning you often fought half-blind, guessing where shots came from. Add poor optics compared to German Zeiss glass, and gunners missed easy targets while enemies flanked. Ergonomics? Forget it. Controls placed awkwardly, pedals hard to reach for taller guys, no thought for human comfort in Stalin's rush to out-tank everyone. The gun itself was decent, but slow to load and traverse manually in early models, turret rotation cranky and power-assisted only later. All this meant crews were exhausted before fights even started, reaction times slow, mistakes fatal. In the panic of Barbarossa, untrained crews, many fresh from farms, thrown into kv-1s without proper familiarization, amplifying the hell. Wrong gears, stripping transmissions, missed shots from bad sights, tanks ditched in ditches from blind driving. German reports gloated over captured kv-1s, calling them technically interesting but practically useless due to reliability woes. Yet when they worked, kv-1s were monsters, like in the defense of Leningrad or Moscow counterattacks, ramming panzers or absorbing hits to cover infantry. But for every heroic stand, dozens broke down or trapped crews in burning hulks when side armor, 75mm, got penetrated by upgunned panzers or 75mm packs. The psychological toll was huge, knowing your unbreakable tank could betray you any time, leaving you exposed. By 1942, the Soviets phased it out for the kv-85 and then IS series, fixing many flaws, but the early kv-1 crews paid the price in blood and sweat. So, was it Stalin's genius or a rushed disaster? Stick around as we dig into specific battles like Raseiniai in detail, the Winter War precursors, and how one kv-1 changed the war early on, plus comparisons to T-34 that replaced it. Let's zoom in on that legendary Raseiniai battle because it's the perfect example of the kv-1's double-edged sword, heroic on the outside, hellish inside. Late June 1941, near the Dubysa River in Lithuania, a lone kv-1, probably from the 2nd Tank Division, gets separated or breaks down slightly, but positions itself perfectly on a vital road junction, blocking the advance of the German 6th Panzer Division under General Erhard Raus. For over 24 hours, this one tank holds off an entire Kampfgruppe. Panzers circle, trying 50mm shots that bounce harmlessly. Anti-tank guns dragged up fire point blank and dent the armor at best. Even 105mm howitzers score only superficial hits. The Germans try everything. Diving Stukas drop bombs that crater around it but don't penetrate. Engineers sneak up with charges but get mown down by the coaxial machine gun. Finally, they camouflage an 88mm flak gun, score side hits to jam the turret, and the KV falls silent. When they pry it open, the crew's dead from shrapnel or exhaustion, having fought non-stop in that sealed metal box. Soviet propaganda turned it into a myth of invincibility, but imagine being those 4 or 5 guys inside. No escape, ventilation choking on gun smoke, temperatures soaring from constant firing, loader hauling heavy shells in zero space while the tank rocks from impacts, driver unable to move far if stuck, commander screaming orders over the roar, knowing breakdown or ammo depletion means death. No relief, no rotation, pure endurance test in a coffin that wouldn't open easy. Stories from other KV crews echo this. In one clash near Leningrad, a kv-1 absorbs 135 hits without penetration, but the concussion inside rattles brains, causing nosebleeds and disorientation, crew emerging half-deaf if they survived. The armor saved them from shells, but punished with every bounce. Vibrations like earthquakes, spalling flaking off inside even on non-pens, cutting faces and eyes. And when it did get hit hard, side or rear 75mm armor wasn't as thick, and internal layout meant ammo racks exposed. One penetration often cooked off rounds, turning the Unbreakable into a crematorium. Crews feared fire more than anything, with hatches tough to open under stress, many trapped burning alive. Now let's talk the Winter War roots because that's where the KV nightmare began. In 1939-1940 against Finland, Soviet T-26s and BTs got shredded by Molotovs and logs, exposing light armor flaws, so designers rushed the KV prototype, basically up-armored T-28 ideas with multi-turret madness dropped for one big gun. It performed okay in tests, shrugging Finnish 37mm, but production was hasty, cast armor uneven with weak spots from poor welding, quality control trash due to Stalin's purges gutting engineers. By Barbarossa, many kv-1s rolled out half-finished, no radios in early batches meaning hand signals or flags for coordination, isolating crews further in battle noise. Training was minimal. Red Army conscripts, often illiterate peasants, got days, not weeks on complex machines, leading to misuse, over-revving engines causing failures, wrong gear selection stripping transmissions, even tanks flipped in ditches from blind maneuvers. One division reported 50% KV losses to non-combat causes in the first weeks, ditched in mud the wide tracks couldn't always handle if driver panicked, or abandoned when clutch burned out. German tow teams loved capturing them intact for study, turning Soviet giants against their makers. The psychological hell was brutal too. Crews knew their tank was rare and valuable, so orders were hold to the last, no retreat, turning breakdowns into death sentences as infantry support fled. In the Moscow counteroffensive, winter 1941 to 1942, KV-1s shone pushing back Germans, wide tracks excelling in snow where Panzers slipped. But inside, frostbite from poor heating, optics icing over, diesel gelling in extreme cold, requiring open-flame preheats that risked fires. Crews bundled in everything they had, but metal conducted cold, fingers numb on controls, breath fogging sights. One account from a survivor, "We were unbreakable outside, but freezing to death inside, praying for the engine not to stall or we'd be ice statues." By 1942, complaints piled up. KV too slow, max 22 miles per hour off-road, too heavy for bridges, fuel-hungry despite diesel, and outclassed by upgunned German long 75mm that pierced frontally at range. Soviets introduced up-armored kv-1s with lighter weight and better transmission, but even that was stopgap. The real fix came with T-34-85 and IS-2, mass-produced reliables that didn't torture crews. The KV-1's legacy? About 3,000 built, terrifying early war but phased out fast, many lost to self-inflicted woes. It forced Germans to upgun everything, birthing tigers and panthers in response, escalating the arms race. But for the men who crewed them, heroes in propaganda, sufferers in reality, it was a giant that crushed spirits as much as enemies. What do you think made it worse, the mechanical betrayals or the human design ignores? Hang tight for Part 3, where we'll compare it head-to-head with T-34, dive into more forgotten clashes like the Brody pocket disaster, and reveal why Stalin quietly killed the KV line despite the myths. Now let's stack the KV-1 head-to-head against its famous successor, the T-34, because this comparison really hammers home why crews suffered so much in the Unbreakable giant, while the T-34 became the Red Army's savior. The T-34 hit the scene around the same time, with sloped armor that bounced shots effectively, but at half the weight, 26 tons versus KV's 45, making it faster, more reliable, and way easier to produce in masses. Where the KV lumbered at 22 miles per hour off-road and guzzled fuel crossing bridges that often collapsed under it, the T-34 zipped at 30-plus miles per hour with Christie suspensions soaking up bumps, wide tracks floating over mud without the KV's frequent bog-downs. Transmission on the T-34 was still rough early on, but improved fast, not the constant grinder of the KV's clutch-killing mess. Crew space? Night and day. T-34 was cramped too, but 4 men instead of 5. Better laid out controls, turret traverse powered reliably, loader not battling for elbow room like in the KV's sardine can. Visibility improved with better periscopes, and the diesel engine ran cooler, less prone to boilovers or cold gelling. Soviets built over 80,000 T-34s versus just 3,000 KVs because it was simpler, cheaper, and didn't break down every few kilometers. Crews could fight instead of fix. The KV shocked Germans into upgrading, but the T-34 overwhelmed them with numbers and mobility, proving reliability beats raw armor when you're on the offensive. Stalin quietly axed the KV line by 1943, shifting factories to T-34-85 with bigger guns and IS heavies that fixed KV flaws without the excess weight. It was a harsh lesson. Overbuild for invincibility, and you cripple your own side with logistics nightmares. One more forgotten disaster to seal this nightmare, the Battle of Brody in June-July 1941, one of the biggest tank clashes ever, where Soviet Southwest Front threw hundreds of KVs and T-34s against German Panzer Group 1 in Ukraine. On paper, Soviets had superior tanks, kv-1s shrugging early hits, scattering panzers in local counterattacks, but coordination sucked, fuel and ammo shortages from Luftwaffe strikes, and those damn breakdowns turned it into a rout. Dozens of kv-1s abandoned intact from mechanical failures or ditching in ravines, crews fleeing on foot as Germans encircled pockets. Losses were catastrophic. Over 800 Soviet tanks gone, many KVs captured for German testing or conversion, while the Wehrmacht lost far fewer. Survivors described the hell, advancing boldly only for transmission to seize, sitting ducks for Stukas, or overheating in the summer heat with no water, crews collapsing from exhaustion inside before enemy even closed. It highlighted Stalin's pre-war paranoia. Heavy tanks scattered in penny packets instead of concentrated, untrained crews wasting potential, poor logistics starving beasts that needed tons of fuel and parts. The kv-1's early terror forced German evolution, long 75mm guns, then Tigers, but at the cost of thousands of Red Army lives lost to their own machines' betrayals. In the end, the unbreakable giant was unbreakable only against early threats, breaking its crews with every mile and fight, a symbol of Soviet resilience mixed with brutal inefficiency. Those men who held roads alone or absorbed impossible punishment were absolute heroes, suffering in ways propaganda never showed. Frostbitten, fume-choked, bruised and battered in a tank that demanded superhuman endurance just to function. The myth lives on in games and models as an invincible icon, but the reality was pure hell for the guys sealed inside. So, what hits harder for you? The heroic stands or the needless suffering from bad design? Drop your thoughts in the comments. Like if this flipped your view on the kv-1, subscribe for more raw WW2 truths that bust the legends, and share with your tank history buddies. Thanks for sticking through this deep dive on forgotten battles of WW2. Next time, we'll uncover another machine that looked perfect but tormented its own. Peace out.